policies mandatory. Thank you.
Charles Chevelle.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, I would like to just echo the sentiments of the Speaker who's resumed his seat. After I spoke about the local alcohol policy issue, the Minister got to her feet and explained the government's position. But I think, notwithstanding what was said on that occasion, the reality is this: communities that are at risk from alcohol abuse are going to contain people who are the least equipped and the least motivated to get involved at local government level and to try to make a difference. And that's the reality. It's a sad reality, but that was the evidence that the Select Committee heard. And so to say we're not going to require local government to act responsibly by considering the issue of the content of what sort of policy should exist in their region, submitted on exhaustively by the public and containing rules that are appropriate to that region, we're simply going to make it optional as to whether they have those rules that will influence their licensing decisions, is frankly the height of irresponsibility. And if we are serious about trying to address the harm that alcohol can cause in our communities when it's used irresponsibly, we would require the next tier of government down from this House to address the issue. And that's all we'd be doing. We wouldn't be telling them how to do it. It would be up to them. If we were to follow the approach in the supplementary order paper, either in my name or in Mr Haig's name, we'd simply be saying, here are the criteria that you can address. Here's the consultative procedure that you should adopt. Ask your communities what rules you should follow when you make a licensing decision, and then follow them. And probably the worst abdication of responsibility that we will be undertaking in this debate, if we fail to consider those SOPs seriously, is that failure. Sir, I want to address another supplementary order paper that's been spoken to by its sponsor already in the debate, and that is the supplementary order paper that stands in the name of my dear friend and colleague Leanne Dalzell. Now, she spoke to this paper only some minutes ago, and I found it, as I always do when I listen to her contributions, a compelling one, because she made a couple of points that were very important, and they bear repeating, given, frankly, the lies that have circulated about what her supplementary order paper would do. And the fact that those lies have circulated indicates the force and the power of the vested interests that stand against sensible regulation in this area. Now, what that supplementary order paper would do, as we heard Leanne Dalzell tell the committee, is this. It would simply insert a 1 or 2 line clause into the bill that would give the Minister and the Chair a particular power. And that power would be that when she receives the report that she's already asked officials for, that is a power on the merits of whether there ought to be a minimum alcohol price and whether it would make a difference to binge drinking, particularly in respect of the very cheap $6 wine type products that she mentioned in her contribution. Then the Minister would be able to make regulations that brought into effect a minimum pricing regime to address those very low-end products. Now, the point about those low-end products, sir, is this, and I'm sure that this will be borne out in the evidence that the Minister receives from her working group. When people preload, which is a term we learnt at the Select Committee, it's in the Law Commission report as well, when people, before they go out to drink at home and get drunk before they go out and get drunker, which is the essence of this binge drinking culture that I think we all agree we need to address, then one of the beverages of choice for doing that is those very, very cheap loss-leading bottles of wine that are able to be purchased at the supermarket. And if we were able to raise the price just at that very low end of the market, through the sort of regime, Mr Chairman, that the Minister would be free under the powers that Leanne Dalzell's supplementary order paper would confer on her, then we would make a big difference, at least to one important aspect of the binge drinking culture. So that's all that the SOP does. It just confers a power on the Minister. Who knows? If the Minister's able to overcome the enormous pressure that's clearly been brought to bear on her and others by the industry, at the time that the report is received by her on minimum pricing, and does determine to introduce such a regime, she's going to have to come back to the House anyway and request that we give her powers to do so. She has to take powers, they're not already on the statute book. And what we're trying to do, what Leanne Dalzell's trying to do, is simply save her the need to do that. We're the opposition, we're here to help. And what we're doing is simply saying to the Minister, rather than having to go to the Leader of the House and ask for yet more time to take up with the parliamentary agenda on alcohol law reform, she could simply have the power now. She wouldn't have to use it. It would never have to be a scheme that's brought into force if either the evidence doesn't support it, which I doubt, or she chooses to bow to the status quo and not bring in a minimum pricing regime. But should she choose to do so, then my colleague's supplementary order paper would empower her to do it. And there'd be the usual checks and balances that surround the exercise of such powers. The Minister would bring in a scheme by regulation. The scheme would be laid on the table. It would be presented to the Regulations Review Committee and scrutinised. It would be open to complaint. So if the industry or anybody else didn't like it, or if the punters out there felt that it was putting up the cost of their harmless leisure drinking with food, the occasional tipple, they'd be able to complain to the committee and seek to have the scheme set aside. And any member of the Regulations Review Committee, sir, as you know, could come along to the House with a disallowance motion. So there'd be all sorts of safeguards in place, there'd be all sorts of scrutiny that would apply to the sort of scheme, but there'd be enormous freedom for the Minister to use the evidence to come up with the sort of regulatory regime that we heard in the Select Committee would make a real difference, along with the sorts of changes that we've seen proposed in supplementary order papers around advertising, the sorts of supplementary order papers that we've seen around availability. The final leg in the trifecta, sir, is pricing. And all that Leanne Dalzell is trying to do here is empower the Minister to deal with this issue, to give her one of the essential tools that we heard the experts tell us is required if this matter of binge drinking is to be finally and properly addressed by this Parliament. And if National Party members decide to vote the supplementary order paper down by accepting the whip, as we anticipate they will, then they will be doing a major disservice to the cause of alcohol law reform in New Zealand. This will be a major lost opportunity. And I remember when the Minister was addressing the question of local alcohol policies and whether or not they ought to be a requirement of territorial local authorities, she said something like this, and she'll forgive me if I'm not paraphrasing her exactly. Members will be punished, members of local authorities will be punished through an electoral reckoning if they fail to live up to their responsibilities. Well, I want to remind the Minister and National Party members of those words now. Because if National Party members fail in this fundamental duty to keep New Zealanders safe by addressing the issue of price, as we were told by the experts we should on this occasion, then there will be an electoral reckoning, because every member on this side of the House who supports Leanne Dalzell's supplementary order paper and like measures that are before the committee will be reminding the electorate of that failure. And it is our duty to do that, because if members do support the objects and purposes of the Act, which are to try to bring in better controls to combat the problems we have around the unfortunate aspects of misuse of alcohol in our society, then price is a fundamental mechanism. And I, for the life of me, cannot see why a minister would decline powers that would allow her to act in the event that she receives recommendations from a review which is already on foot and which could report at any time soon, sir, and which would prevent her from having to come back to the House, seek time on the audit paper. This is a sensible supplementary audit paper and deserves the greatest support.
Thank you for the call, Mr Chair. I'll just address some of the issues that have been raised by the previous speakers.